The contract sat on the mahogany desk between us, 3 pages of legal text that would change my life forever. I stared at it, my hands trembling slightly as I tried to process what Alessandro Moretti had just asked me to do. Be his wife. In public. For 1 year. In exchange for $3 million and the solution to every problem that had brought me to this desperate moment. My name is Emma Walsh, and 3 weeks ago, I was a completely ordinary person living a completely ordinary life. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, lived in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, and spent my weekends reading novels and avoiding my mother's phone calls about why I was still single at 31 years old. My life was quiet, predictable, and safe. Exactly how I liked it after growing up in chaos. Then my brother, Michael, made a catastrophic mistake. Michael had always been the risk-taker in our family. Where I was careful and cautious, he was impulsive and optimistic. Where I saved money, he spent it on ventures that never quite worked out. Our parents had died in a car accident when I was 23, and Michael was 20, leaving us with each other and not much else. I had tried to be the responsible one, the one who kept us both afloat. But Michael's latest mistake was beyond anything I could fix alone. He had borrowed money from the wrong people. A lot of money. $250,000 to invest in what he swore was a legitimate business opportunity. Except the opportunity was a scam. The money was gone. And the people he had borrowed from were not the type to accept late payments or negotiate installment plans. They were connected. Dangerous. The kind of people who made examples of those who did not pay their debts. Michael had disappeared 2 weeks ago, leaving me with a note that explained everything and begged me to stay out of it. But staying out of it meant watching my brother die or disappear permanently. So I had done the only thing I could think of. I had tried to find someone more powerful than the men Michael owed. Someone who could protect him. Someone who could make this nightmare stop. That search had led me to Alessandro Moretti. Alessandro was not just powerful. He was the power. At 37 years old, he controlled more of the city's underground economy than anyone else. His family had built an empire over 3 generations, and he had expanded it with ruthless efficiency. He owned legitimate businesses, restaurants, nightclubs, real estate. But everyone knew those were fronts for more lucrative illegal operations. He was feared, respected, and completely untouchable by law enforcement. He was also devastatingly handsome in a way that made him more intimidating rather than less. Dark hair always perfectly styled, sharp features that looked carved from marble, eyes so dark they appeared black except when light caught them at certain angles and revealed deep brown. He dressed in suits that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Getting a meeting with him had been nearly impossible. I had gone to one of his restaurants and asked to speak with him. Been turned away. Tried again at another location. Same result. Finally, in desperation, I had written him a letter explaining my situation and left it with a hostess at his flagship restaurant, begging her to make sure it reached him. To my shock, he had called me the next day. His voice on the phone had been smooth, cultured, with just a hint of an Italian accent that suggested immigrant parents but an American upbringing. Miss Walsh, I understand you need my help with a rather delicate situation. Come to my office tomorrow at 8 p.m. Come alone. That had been yesterday. And now I sat across from him in his penthouse office, staring at a contract that offered salvation in exchange for something I could not quite understand. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. I forced my voice to remain steady. You want me to pretend to be your wife, in public, for 1 year. In exchange, you will clear my brother's debt and ensure his safety. That is correct. Alessandro's voice was calm, matter of fact, as if he were discussing a business transaction rather than a fake marriage. You would accompany me to social events, business dinners, charity galas. You would live in my home. Present yourself as my devoted wife to anyone outside my inner circle. In private, we would maintain separate lives, separate bedrooms, no expectations of intimacy. After 1 year, we would stage a quiet divorce. You would receive $3 million, and you would never speak of this arrangement to anyone. Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why would someone like you need a fake wife? You could have any woman you wanted. Real women who would actually want to marry you. Something flickered across his face. Not quite amusement. Not quite annoyance. That is not your concern, Miss Walsh. All you need to know is that I have my reasons, and those reasons make this arrangement beneficial to both of us. You get your brother's safety and financial security. I get what I need. Do we have an agreement? I should have walked away. Should have recognized that accepting this offer meant entering a world far more dangerous than Michael's debt. But the alternative was watching my brother die, and I could not live with that. What about my job? My apartment? My life? You would quit your job. Tell them you are moving for personal reasons. Your apartment lease would be handled, belongings moved to my residence. As for your life, Alessandro leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes intense. Your life for the next year would be as my wife. That is the arrangement, Miss Walsh. All or nothing. And my brother? What happens to him? The debt would be erased immediately upon your signature. Your brother would be contacted and informed that he is under my protection. Anyone who touches him would be answering to me. He would be safe. Emma, you have my word. The use of my first name, spoken in his accented voice, sent an unexpected shiver through me. I looked at the contract again, at the dotted line waiting for my signature. $3 million. My brother's life. 1 year of pretending to be married to a man who terrified and fascinated me in equal measure. I need to know one thing. I met his gaze directly. This hidden motive you have, this reason you need a fake wife, is it going to put me in danger? Am I going to end up hurt or dead because of whatever you are really planning? Alessandro studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice carrying a weight that suggested truth. The arrangement may be complicated, Emma. It may be difficult, but I promise you will not be physically harmed because of it. Your safety is important to me, for reasons I cannot fully explain yet. The way he said it, with that slight hesitation before important, made me wonder what he was not saying. But I was out of options and out of time. I signed the contract. Alessandro witnessed my signature, then signed his own with a flourish. The moment the pen left the paper, I felt the weight of what I had just done settle over me like a heavy cloak. Excellent. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. I will have my assistant contact you tomorrow with details about moving your belongings. We will announce our engagement in 3 days at a charity gala. That gives you just enough time to prepare. 3 days. I stood as well, my legs slightly unsteady. That is not much time to learn how to pretend to be your fiancé. You will learn quickly. He moved around the desk, standing closer than was strictly comfortable. Or you will fake it until you do. Most of marriage is performance anyway, Emma. We will simply be more honest about it than most couples. His cynicism should not have surprised me, given who he was. But something about it made me sad. Had he always been this jaded, or had his life made him this way? A man appeared in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered with the bearing of someone trained in violence. Alessandro's bodyguard, I assumed. Marco will drive you home, Alessandro said. Pack a bag for the next few days. Tomorrow. A stylist will meet you at your apartment to begin preparing your wardrobe. You will need appropriate clothing for your new role. Appropriate clothing. As if I were auditioning for a part in a play. Which, I supposed, I was. The drive back to my apartment was silent. Marco did not speak, and I was too overwhelmed to attempt conversation. When he dropped me off, he handed me a phone. Mr. Moretti wanted you to have this. His only direct communication with me. It is secure. Use it only to contact him or his designated associates. I took the phone, adding it to the growing pile of evidence that my life had just taken a sharp turn into surreal territory. That night, I barely slept. I kept reaching for my regular phone to call Michael, to tell him he was safe, but I did not have his number. He had gotten a burner phone before disappearing, and I had no way to reach him. I had to trust that Alessandro would keep his word and contact him. The next morning, a woman named Sophia arrived at my door precisely at 9 a.m. She was elegant, professional, and carried several large bags and a tablet. "Miss Walsh, I am Sophia DeLuca, Mr. Moretti's personal stylist. I am here to ensure you have everything you need for your new position." Position. As if being Alessandro's fake wife were a job, which I supposed it was. Over the next 4 hours, Sophia transformed my wardrobe. She took measurements, showed me photographs of designer dresses and suits, asked questions about my preferences that I barely knew how to answer. By the time she left, my modest apartment was filled with garment bags containing clothing worth more than I had earned in the past 5 years. That evening, Alessandro himself appeared at my door. He was dressed more casually than before, dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. "Tomorrow, we go public," he said without preamble. "Tonight, we practice. Practice being a couple." He entered my apartment without invitation, his presence immediately making the space feel smaller. "We need to be believable, Emma. That requires a certain level of familiarity." Over the next 2 hours, Alessandro taught me how to be his wife, how to stand beside him, close enough to suggest intimacy, but not so close as to seem clingy, how to laugh at his jokes even when they were not funny, how to touch his arm when making a point, how to look at him with affection rather than fear. It was the most surreal experience of my life. This dangerous man, this criminal who could end lives with a word, patiently coaching me on how to smile at him correctly. "You are thinking too much," he said at one point, frustration evident in his voice. "Stop analyzing every gesture. Just be natural." How can I be natural when this entire situation is completely unnatural? I snapped back, my own frustration boiling over. "You are asking me to pretend to love someone I barely know, someone who terrifies me, someone whose real motives I cannot even begin to understand. Natural is not exactly an option here." Alessandro went very still, his dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Do I terrify you, Emma?" "Yes." The honesty escaped before I could censor it. "You terrify me. Your power terrifies me. What you do terrifies me. And this whole situation terrifies me because I have no idea what I have really agreed to." To my surprise, he did not look angry. Instead, something almost like regret crossed his features. Perhaps fear is not the worst foundation for a marriage. At least it is honest. The comment was so unexpected, so revealing, that I did not know how to respond. Before I could formulate a reply, Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "I need to go. Business." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The gala is tomorrow at 8 p.m. A car will pick you up at 6:30. Wear the black dress Sophia selected. And Emma," he turned back, his eyes meeting mine. "Thank you for agreeing to this. I know it is not easy." He left before I could ask what he meant. Thank you implied gratitude, maybe even guilt. Those were not emotions I expected from Alessandro Moretti. The charity gala was held at the Grandview Hotel, a historic building with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people's houses. I arrived in the black dress Sophia had selected, a floor-length gown that managed to be both elegant and subtly seductive. My hair had been professionally styled, my makeup applied by an artist Sophia had sent to my apartment. I looked like someone else entirely, someone who belonged in Alessandro's world. The car dropped me at a private entrance where Alessandro waited. He wore a tuxedo that had clearly been tailored specifically for him, and when his eyes met mine, I saw something flicker in their depths. Appreciation, maybe, or possession. "You look beautiful." He extended his arm. "Shall we?" I took his arm, and we entered the gala together. The room was full of the city's elite. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, and woven among them, people like Alessandro. People whose money came from sources no one discussed in polite company, but everyone knew about. The moment we entered, conversations shifted. Eyes turned to us. Whispers began. Alessandro Moretti had arrived with a woman, an unusual occurrence according to the gossip I had researched. He typically attended events alone, or with business associates. Never with a date. We moved through the room, Alessandro's hand warm and possessive at the small of my back. He introduced me to dozens of people, always with the same phrase. "This is Emma Walsh, my fiancée." The reactions varied. Some people offered genuine congratulations. Others barely concealed their shock. A few, particularly some of the women, looked at me with something like pity, as if I were a lamb being led to slaughter. It was during the dinner portion of the evening that I first sensed the real reason for our arrangement. We were seated at a table with several business associates of Alessandro's, along with their wives and dates. The conversation was superficial at first, discussion of the charity, the food, the usual small talk that filled such events. Then a man across the table, silver-haired and expensively dressed, addressed Alessandro directly. "I must admit, Alessandro, this engagement comes as quite a surprise. I had heard you swore off marriage after, well..." He trailed off meaningfully. "After Valentina died." Alessandro's voice was flat, emotionless. "Yes, that was 5 years ago, Marcus. People change, situations change. Valentina." The name hit me like cold water. Alessandro had been married before. His wife had died. And suddenly pieces began clicking into place. This was not about business or appearances. This was about a dead wife. Of course, Marcus nodded, but there was speculation in his eyes. "And Miss Walsh, how did you meet Alessandro?" I opened my mouth, realizing I had no prepared answer. Alessandro and I had not discussed our origin story. But before I could fumble through a response, Alessandro's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "We met at an art gallery," he said smoothly. "Emma is a designer. She was admiring a piece I happened to be considering for purchase. We struck up a conversation, and he turned to look at me with such convincing affection that my breath caught. I was captivated. The story was plausible, romantic enough to be believed, and completely false. But the way Alessandro told it, with warmth in his voice and his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand, almost made me believe it too. The evening continued, and I noticed a pattern. Every time conversation turned to Alessandro's past, to Valentina, to his 5 years of being publicly single, he would redirect with mentions of our relationship, of his happiness, of looking forward to the future. I was not just playing the role of his wife, I was playing the role of the woman who had made him love again. The woman who had helped him move past his dead wife. The realization made me feel sick. This was the hidden motive. Not business, not appearances, but grief. I was a prop in Alessandro's performance of being over his wife's death. The discovery should have made me angry, should have made me confront him immediately about using me as some sort of emotional shield, but instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Because no one used a fake wife to convince people they were over a real one, unless the grief was still overwhelming. Unless moving on was impossible but necessary for reasons I did not yet understand. Later that night, back in Alessandro's penthouse, I finally confronted him. We had barely spoken during the car ride home, both of us exhausted from hours of performance. But once we were alone in the vast living room of his home, I could not stay silent. Valentina, I said, watching his back as he poured himself a drink. Your wife. That is what this is really about, is it not? Alessandro's shoulders tensed, but he did not turn around. What did you hear? Enough. Enough to understand that I am not here to make you look powerful or connected or whatever I thought this might be about. I am here to make you look like you have moved on from your dead wife. He finally turned, his expression carefully neutral. And does that change anything? You signed a contract, Emma. Your brother is safe. The terms of our arrangement remain the same regardless of my motivations. It changes everything. I moved closer, anger and sympathy warring in my chest. You made me believe this was a business arrangement. Cold. Transactional. But it is not, is it? This is about grief and pretending and using me as a human shield against whatever pain you are still feeling. You do not know what you are talking about. His voice was cold, but I heard the edge beneath, the crack in his armor. Then explain it to me. I challenged. Tell me why a man who clearly is not over his wife's death needs to convince everyone he is. What is the real motive here, Alessandro? Because I am standing in for a ghost, and I deserve to know why. For a long moment, I thought he would not answer, would shut down or walk away or remind me that I had no right to question him. But instead, he did something unexpected. He told me the truth. If you are enjoying Emma and Alessandro's story so far, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me create more content like this. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you. And now let us continue with the truth Alessandro is about to reveal. Valentina's death was not an accident. Alessandro's voice was low, controlled, but I heard the pain beneath. She was killed, murdered, by rivals who wanted to weaken me, hurt me, prove they could reach even those closest to me. I sank onto the sofa, the revelation hitting me like a physical blow. I am so sorry. Her death nearly destroyed me. He continued, staring into his glass as if it held answers. I became dangerous, reckless. I made decisions based on rage rather than strategy. I nearly lost everything my family had built because I could not function through the grief. My associates, my family, they watched me spiral and worried I would take us all down with me. So they want you to move on, I said slowly, understanding dawning. To marry again. To prove you are stable, functional, capable of leading without emotion clouding your judgment. They need me to move on, Alessandro corrected. To them, grief is weakness. Attachment is liability. A leader in my world cannot be vulnerable to emotional manipulation, cannot have obvious pressure points that enemies can exploit. By remaining publicly devastated by Valentina's death, I was showing weakness, advertising that I could be hurt by attacking those I love. And now, by having me, by appearing to have found love again, you are closing that vulnerability, showing that you have moved past the grief that made you reckless. Exactly. He finally looked at me, and I saw in his eyes a depth of pain I had not expected. But the reality is more complicated than that. Because I have not moved on, Emma. I still love her. Still see her in quiet moments. Still blame myself for not protecting her better. This arrangement is not about healing. It is about hiding, using you as a mask to cover wounds that have not stopped bleeding. The raw honesty devastated me. This was not the cold mobster I had expected. This was a man broken by loss, forced to pretend he was whole because vulnerability in his world meant death. Why tell me this? I asked softly. Why not just keep lying, keep using me without me understanding the full picture? Because you deserved to know what you had really signed up for. And because, he set down his glass, because pretending to love someone while actually loving a ghost is harder than I anticipated. You are, he struggled with the words, you are not what I expected, Emma Walsh. What did you expect? Someone more mercenary. Someone who would take the money and play the role without asking questions or caring about the emotional reality. Instead, I got you. Someone with empathy and intelligence and an annoying habit of seeing through my carefully constructed facades. I did not know whether to be insulted or complimented. Is that a problem? I do not know yet. Alessandro moved to sit across from me, his posture less guarded than I had seen it. But I think it might make this year more bearable. Having someone who knows the truth, who understands this is all performance. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of his revelation settling between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been building since his confession. Do you want to tell me about her? About Valentina? Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. No one asks about her anymore. They treat her like a forbidden topic, as if talking about her will break me all over again. Will it? Probably. But maybe that is not the worst thing. Maybe holding it all in is what is really destroying me. So he told me. About how he met Valentina at a family wedding, both of them bored by the ceremony and seeking escape in the garden. About her laugh, which he said could light up entire rooms. About how she had known what he was, what his family did, and loved him anyway. About their wedding, small and intimate, just family. About 3 years of happiness before rivals decided to send a message by killing her. She was shopping. Alessandro's voice broke slightly. Just shopping for groceries like a normal person. They grabbed her in the parking lot. By the time my men found her, she was already gone. And the message was clear. No one you love is safe. Your power means nothing if we can take from you what matters most. What did you do? To the people responsible? What needed to be done? His voice hardened. They do not exist anymore. Their entire organization was dismantled. But that did not bring her back, did not fill the emptiness she left. I found myself reaching across the space between us, taking his hand in mine. The gesture was impulsive, maybe inappropriate given our arrangement. But in that moment, he was not the dangerous mob boss. He was just a man drowning in grief with no one to throw him a lifeline. I am sorry you lost her, and I am sorry your world does not let you grieve properly. That must be unbearable. It is. He looked at our joined hands, not pulling away. Which is why I need this. Need you. To create enough distance between me and that grief that I can function, that I can lead without my emotions being used against me, that I can survive. The word survive hit me hard, because it revealed the truth beneath everything. Alessandro Moretti, powerful mob boss, was not trying to convince people he was over his wife to maintain appearances. He was doing it to survive. Because in his world, visible grief was dangerous, made him a target, put everyone connected to him at risk. Your hidden motive, I said slowly. It is not just about looking strong. It is about actually being safe. If your enemies think you have moved on, think you have someone else you love, they might not try to hurt me the way they hurt her. Because you will have shown you can recover from such losses. That hurting those close to you is not an effective strategy. Now you understand. Alessandro's grip on my hand tightened. I am not just using you as a prop, Emma. I am using you as a shield. If they believe I love you, and believe I have proven I can survive losing someone I love, you become less valuable as a target. The deterrent is not that you matter to me. It is that hurting you would not destroy me the way hurting Valentina did. The logic was twisted, dark, completely foreign to how normal people navigated relationships. But in Alessandro's world, it made a horrible kind of sense. He was protecting me by pretending to love me, while also showing he could survive losing me. It was perhaps the most depressing romantic strategy I had ever encountered. So I am safe, because you are showing you are over your actual dead wife by pretending to love your fake living wife. I tried to make it sound less insane when spoken aloud. It did not work. When you put it that way, it sounds insane. Alessandro almost smiled. But yes, that is essentially the arrangement. We sat like that for a long time, hands joined, the truth settling between us. Eventually, Alessandro showed me to my room in his penthouse. It was large, luxurious, with a bed that could sleep 4 people, and an ensuite bathroom that was larger than my entire apartment bedroom had been. "If you need anything, my room is at the end of the hall," Alessandro said from the doorway. "And Emma," he paused, "thank you for listening tonight, for not judging." "I am not sure I am in a position to judge," I replied honestly. "My brother made a mistake, and I am pretending to marry a mob boss to save him. Glass houses and all that." After he left, I lay awake for hours, processing everything I had learned. The hidden motive that had left me trembling was not what I expected. It was not about deceiving business associates or maintaining an image. It was about survival, grief, and the twisted logic of a world where love was weakness and attachment was danger. I had thought Alessandro was using me callously, but the reality was more complicated. He was using me to survive, to protect both of us in a world where caring about someone made you vulnerable. It was mercenary and calculating and deeply, profoundly sad. The next morning, I woke to find Alessandro already gone. A note on the kitchen counter explaining he had business and would return that evening. The apartment was silent, enormous, and I felt adrift in it. My things were being moved from my old apartment today, according to a text from Sophia. But until then, I had nothing to do except explore my new prison, or palace, depending on how I looked at it. I spent the day wandering the penthouse, discovering its secrets. A library with floor-to-ceiling books, many in Italian. A home gym that looked like it belonged in a professional facility. An office with multiple monitors showing security camera feeds from various locations. And in Alessandro's bedroom, which I entered only because the door was open, a photograph on the nightstand. Valentina had been beautiful. Dark hair, warm eyes, a smile that indeed seemed capable of lighting up rooms. In the photo, she was laughing at something off camera, her expression full of life and joy. No wonder Alessandro was still devastated by her loss. She looked like the kind of person who made the world brighter just by existing. I realized then that I was not just competing with a memory. I was competing with a ghost who could never disappoint, never age, never become anything less than perfect in Alessandro's mind. The fake marriage was hard enough. Doing it while knowing I could never measure up to his real love made it feel impossible. My things arrived that afternoon, looking pathetically small and shabby compared to the elegance of the penthouse. As movers brought in boxes, I directed them to my room, feeling like an imposter. This was not my home. This was Alessandro's space, and I was just a temporary guest playing a role. That evening, Alessandro returned with a jewelry box. Inside was a ring. Not an engagement ring. We had skipped that step apparently, but a wedding band. Simple platinum with small diamonds embedded in the band. Beautiful and understated. "We are getting married this weekend," he said without preamble. "Small ceremony. Just witnesses required by law. Nothing romantic or emotional. Purely functional. This weekend," I repeated, still staring at the ring. "That is, very fast. The sooner we are legally married, the sooner the arrangement is official. And the sooner you are under my protection in every sense." He took the ring and slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly, of course. Sophia had probably stolen one of my rings to get the size. Looking at the ring on my hand made everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. In a few days, I would be Emma Moretti, wife of a mob boss, living a lie to help him hide from grief and protect us both from enemies I could not fully understand. "Are you okay?" Alessandro's voice was surprisingly gentle. "This is moving fast. I understand if you are overwhelmed. I am terrified," I admitted. "Of this arrangement," of your world, of becoming someone I am not. But I searched for the right words, I am also weirdly grateful. You did save my brother. You are keeping your word about that. So even though this is insane and complicated and probably going to end badly, I am grateful. It does not have to end badly, Alessandro said quietly. If we are both honest about what this is, if we maintain boundaries and communicate, we can survive this year. And then you walk away with enough money to build whatever life you want. That is not a bad outcome, Emma. What about you? What do you get besides people thinking you are over Valentina? Peace, maybe. A year where I do not have to explain myself. Where my grief can exist privately while publicly I appear to have moved on. That is worth something. Worth a lot, actually. The wedding took place 3 days later in a judge's office, with only 2 witnesses, members of Alessandro's organization who signed the marriage certificate and then disappeared. I wore a simple white dress that Sophia had procured, though calling it simple did not do justice to the designer label and exquisite tailoring. Alessandro wore one of his perfect suits. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. We said traditional vows, though both of us stumbled over the love, honor, and cherished parts, knowing they were lies. When the judge pronounced us husband and wife, Alessandro kissed me. It was chaste, perfunctory, the bare minimum required to sell the moment. But even that brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through me. We were married. Emma and Alessandro Moretti, husband and wife, for 1 year, for $3 million, for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. The first month of marriage was an education in Alessandro's world. I accompanied him to dinners with business associates who eyed me with curiosity and sometimes suspicion, to charity events where everyone wanted to know how I had captured the heart of the city's most eligible and dangerous bachelor, to family gatherings where Alessandro's mother inspected me with shrewd eyes and his cousins asked invasive questions about our relationship. Through it all, Alessandro and I maintained our performance. We touched casually, the way couples do, held hands, laughed at each other's jokes. I learned to anticipate his movements, to fit myself against his side when photographers appeared, to smile adoringly even when I was exhausted or scared or confused. In private, we were polite roommates. Alessandro was gone most days, handling business I did not ask about. When he was home, we would sometimes have dinner together, conversation flowing surprisingly easily considering our circumstances. He was intelligent, well-read, unexpectedly funny when he let his guard down. I found myself actually enjoying his company, which felt like a betrayal of the arrangement's fundamental dishonesty. It was 6 weeks into the marriage when things began to shift. We attended a gala at a museum, a fundraiser for art restoration. Alessandro had warned me that several of his rivals would be present, men who controlled competing territories and who would love any excuse to undermine him. One of those rivals, a man named Victor Castellano, approached us during cocktail hour. He was older than Alessandro, perhaps 50, with the kind of face that suggested cruelty was habitual rather than occasional. "Alessandro, so good to see you." Victor's smile did not reach his eyes. "And this must be the new wife. Quite a replacement for Valentina." The comment was designed to wound, to suggest I was lesser than a poor substitute. I felt Alessandro tense beside me, his hand at my waist tightening protectively. Before Alessandro could respond with whatever cutting remark he was formulating, I stepped forward slightly, smiling at Victor with all the warmth I could muster. "You must be Mr. Castellano. Alessandro has told me so much about you, though he neglected to mention how charming you are in person." The lie was so obvious it was almost an insult, delivered with just enough sweetness to be deniable. Victor's eyes narrowed, recognizing the cut beneath the politeness. "Charming. Yes, I do try. Tell me, Mrs. Moretti, how are you finding married life? Quite different from... What was it Alessandro said you did before? Graphic design?" "Still do, actually. I kept my smile in place. I freelance now. Gives me more flexibility to support my husband's work, though I suppose running a shipping company is less exciting than whatever it is you do. Alessandro is always so vague about your particular specialties. The implications were clear. I was calling out that Victor's businesses were as illegal as Alessandro's while maintaining plausible deniability. Victor's face darkened. You have a clever wife, Alessandro. Victor's tone had lost its false friendliness. I hope she understands the risks of being too clever in our world. She understands perfectly. Alessandro's voice was cold, and she is under my protection. Everyone in this room understands what that means. Victor held Alessandro's stare for a moment, then nodded curtly and walked away. The moment he was gone, Alessandro turned to me. That was impressive. Unexpected. You just made an enemy feel very off balance. He was trying to hurt you by insulting me. I was not going to let that stand. Alessandro studied me for a long moment, something complicated in his expression. You did not have to defend me, Emma. This is a fake marriage. You are not required to actually protect my reputation or feelings. Maybe not. I met his gaze. But you have kept your word about everything. My brother is safe. I am safe. You have been decent to me. That deserves some loyalty, fake marriage or not. Something shifted between us in that moment. A recognition that perhaps our arrangement was more than just transactional, that somewhere in the performance, actual respect had developed. Maybe even the beginnings of real friendship. That night, after we returned home, Alessandro poured 2 glasses of wine and gestured for me to join him on the balcony overlooking the city. We stood in comfortable silence for several minutes before he spoke. I need to tell you something. His voice was serious. Something I should have mentioned before, but did not know how. My stomach clenched with anxiety. What is it? Valentina and I could not have children. Medical issues on her end. We had been trying for years when she died. And now, with you, people are starting to ask questions. When we will start a family. Whether I want children. It is. He struggled with the words. It is a complication I had not fully considered when I proposed this arrangement. Oh. I tried to process the implications. So people expect us to have children, but obviously that is not part of our agreement. If you enjoyed learning Alessandro's deepest secret and Emma's unexpected defense of him, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next part of their story. Your support means everything. Now, let us see how Emma responds to this new revelation. Exactly. And I have been deflecting those questions, but eventually we will need a story. Are we trying? Are we waiting? Is there a problem? People in my world are intrusive about such things. We could just tell them we are waiting, that we want to enjoy married life first. That buys us some time. Alessandro agreed. But not a year's worth. Eventually, the questions will become more pointed, more invasive. Then we will handle it when it comes up, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We have gotten this far by adapting. We can continue to do that. Alessandro turned to face me fully. I want you to know that if this arrangement becomes too difficult, if the scrutiny or pressure becomes unbearable, you can tell me. We can adjust. Find ways to make this more bearable. Is it bearable for you? I asked, living this lie while still grieving Valentina? Pretending to have moved on when you clearly have not? He was quiet for so long, I thought he would not answer. Then, softly, he said, "It is getting easier. Having you here, playing this role, it is less painful than I expected. You make the performance feel less like a betrayal of her memory and more like survival, which is what it is meant to be. Good. That is good." We stood on the balcony until the wine was gone, and the city lights had dimmed, talking about nothing and everything. About our childhoods, So different yet marked by similar losses. About books we loved and movies we hated. About dreams we had let go and ambitions we still harbored. It was the most honest conversation we had had, and it felt like stepping across some invisible line from strangers playing roles into people who actually knew each other. 3 months into the marriage, I received a letter. It arrived at the penthouse addressed to me, and when I opened it, I found a single page in handwriting I recognized immediately. "Emma," Michael had written. "I do not know how you did it, but thank you. Moretti's people contacted me, said the debt was cleared, said I was under protection now, said you had arranged everything. I am safe because of you, sis. I know I do not deserve your help after what I did, after the position I put you in. But thank you. I am going to use this second chance to be better, to be someone you can be proud of. I am sorry for everything. I love you, Michael." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. My brother was safe. The whole point of this arrangement, the reason I had agreed to this insanity, had worked. Michael was alive and apparently determined to change. Alessandro found me like that, crying over my brother's letter. He read it quietly when I handed it to him, then sat beside me on the sofa. "This is what you wanted. Why you agreed to everything. Your brother's safety." "Yes." I wiped at my tears. "And you kept your word. He is safe. Which means this is all worth it. Is it?" Alessandro asked quietly. "Worth giving up a year of your life? Worth living a lie? Worth being married to someone like me?" I looked at him, really looked at him. Over 3 months I had learned that Alessandro was not the monster I had expected. He was ruthless, yes, dangerous absolutely, but also surprisingly kind in small ways. He made sure I had my favorite coffee every morning, asked about my day and actually listened to the answers, gave me space when I needed it and company when I did not want to be alone. He had become, if not exactly a friend, then something close to it. "Yes," I said honestly. "It is worth it. Not just because Michael is safe, but because this has not been terrible. You have not been terrible. This marriage might be fake, but you have been a decent husband within the parameters we established." Decent is not a word most people would use to describe me. There was something almost like humor in his voice. Most people do not live with you, do not see you when you think no one is watching, do not hear you on the phone with your mother being patient when she criticizes how you live your life, do not notice you checking the security feeds obsessively, not because you are paranoid, but because you are genuinely trying to keep people safe. Alessandro stared at me like I had revealed something he did not know about himself. "You see too much, Emma Walsh. Moretti. You see things I thought I kept hidden. Maybe that is not a bad thing. Maybe being seen, actually seen, is something you need as much as the performance of having moved on." We were sitting very close. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough that when he reached out to brush a tear from my cheek, the gesture felt intimate rather than platonic. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. Really kiss me. Not the performative kisses we exchanged in public. But then his phone rang, shattering the moment, and he pulled away to answer it. The call was business, something requiring his immediate attention. He left shortly after, and I sat alone with my brother's letter and the strange, confusing feelings that had been growing stronger with each passing day. I was supposed to be playing a role, pretending to be Alessandro's wife, but somewhere along the way, the line between performance and reality had begun to blur. It was not love, I told myself firmly. It was proximity and gratitude, and the strange intimacy that came from sharing secrets. It would fade once the year ended and we went our separate ways. It had to fade. Because falling in love with Alessandro Moretti would be the stupidest thing I could possibly do. 4 months in, we attended a wedding. One of Alessandro's cousins was getting married, and our presence was expected. It was a lavish affair. the kind of event where money was displayed with a vulgarity that made me uncomfortable. But the ceremony itself was beautiful, and watching the couple exchange vows with obvious love and devotion made something twist in my chest. "They mean it," I murmured to Alessandro during the reception. "When they said those vows, they actually mean them." "Yes." His voice was carefully neutral. "That is what real marriages look like." "Do you ever wish?" I stopped myself, realizing I was about to cross a line. "Wish what?" he prompted, his eyes finding mine. "Wish this was real. That you had found someone you actually wanted to marry instead of someone you had to marry for protection and appearances." Alessandro was quiet for so long, I thought he would not answer. Then, very softly, he said, "Sometimes I wonder if the difference between real and fake is as clear as we think it is. We perform affection and respect develops. We pretend to care, and find ourselves actually caring. At what point does the performance become reality?" His answer made my heart race, because it acknowledged what I had been feeling. That whatever this was, it had evolved beyond simple transaction. We had become something more than business partners pretending to be married, something that felt dangerously close to an actual relationship. "We are not supposed to care," I said, more to remind myself than him. "That is not part of the arrangement." "No, it is not. But we are human, Emma. Feelings do not follow contracts or agreements. They just happen. Is that a problem?" "I do not know." Alessandro turned to face me fully. We were in a corner of the reception hall, partially hidden by floral arrangements. "Is it a problem for you, this thing that is developing between us?" I should have lied. Should have maintained the boundary between fake marriage and real feelings. But I was tired of lying, tired of performing, tired of pretending I did not feel something real for this complicated, damaged man who had saved my brother and given me a year of safety. "Yes," I admitted. "It is a problem, because in 9 months, this ends. I leave. You go back to your life of grieving Valentina and running your empire. And I will have to figure out how to stop caring about you. That is going to be hard." Alessandro's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "What if it does not have to end? What are you saying?" "I am saying that maybe we could renegotiate. Change the terms of the arrangement. Make it," he struggled with the words, "make it real. If that is something you would want." Before I could answer, before I could even process what he was suggesting, someone called his name. Business associates wanting his attention. The moment shattered, and Alessandro stepped back, his walls rebuilding instantly. "We should talk about this later," he said, his voice once again controlled. "When we have privacy." But later did not come. Alessandro was called away on business that night, something urgent that required him to leave the city. He was gone for 3 days, during which I replayed our conversation obsessively. Make it real. What did that mean? A real marriage? An actual relationship? With him still in love with Valentina? When Alessandro finally returned, he was distant. The walls that had been slowly coming down were firmly back in place. He was polite but cool, treating me with the same careful courtesy he had shown in the first weeks of our arrangement. "Are we going to talk about what you said at the wedding?" I finally asked one evening when the silence had become unbearable. I spoke hastily. His voice was flat, without thinking through the implications. "It is better we maintain the original terms of the arrangement, Emma. Cleaner, less complicated. His rejection should not have hurt as much as it did. We had agreed from the beginning that this was temporary, transactional. But somewhere along the way I had started hoping for more, and now he was making it clear that hope was misplaced. The next 2 months were tense. We maintained our public performance, but in private, the warmth that had been developing between us had cooled. Alessandro buried himself in work. I spent more time in my room, taking on freelance design projects to fill the hours. We were back to being polite strangers living under the same roof. It was 6 months into the marriage when everything came to a head. We attended a business dinner, one of many we had endured. But this one was different. Victor Castellano was there, and he had brought a guest. A beautiful woman with dark hair and warm eyes who looked hauntingly familiar. She looked like Valentina. The resemblance was not exact, but it was close enough that I immediately understood what Victor was doing. He had found someone who resembled Alessandro's dead wife and brought her to this dinner specifically to hurt him, to remind him of what he had lost, to suggest that his new marriage was a poor replacement for what he had really wanted. I watched Alessandro's face when he saw her, saw the flash of pain, quickly masked, saw his hand tighten around his wineglass until I thought it might shatter. Victor was watching too, satisfaction evident in his expression. Without thinking, without planning, I acted. I leaned into Alessandro, my hand finding his under the table, squeezing tightly. "Breathe," I whispered, quiet enough that only he could hear. "She is not Valentina. This is Victor trying to hurt you. Do not let him win." Alessandro turned to look at me, and in his eyes, I saw something crack. The careful control he always maintained, the walls he kept so firmly in place, fractured under the weight of grief and anger and years of pretending to be okay. "I need to leave." His voice was strained. "Now." We stood together, making excuses about a family emergency. The drive home was silent. Alessandro's jaw clenched, his body rigid with tension. Once we were in the penthouse, safe from prying eyes, he finally let go. He did not rage or break things or become violent. Instead, he collapsed onto the sofa and put his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. 5 years of grief that he had been forced to hide, forced to perform through, finally breaking free. I did not think. I just moved to him, pulling him against me, letting him cry into my shoulder while I ran my fingers through his hair and murmured meaningless comfort. We sat like that for what felt like hours, Alessandro finally allowing himself to fall apart with someone who would not judge or use his weakness against him. When the storm finally passed, he pulled back, his face ravaged, but also somehow more peaceful than I had ever seen it. "I am sorry." His voice was hoarse. "You should not have had to see that." "Yes, I should have." I cupped his face in my hands. "You have been holding this in for 5 years, Alessandro. Pretending to be okay when you are not. Performing strength when you are breaking inside. You needed to let it out. And I wanted to be here for you when you did." "Why?" he asked, genuine confusion in his expression. "Why would you want to help me through this? This is not part of our agreement. You are not required to care about my grief." "Maybe not. But I do care. I have been trying not to. Trying to maintain boundaries and remember this is temporary. But I cannot stop caring about you, Alessandro, no matter how hard I try." He stared at me, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted between us. The last walls came down. The performance ended. What was left was just 2 broken people who had somehow found each other in the midst of their separate disasters. "I love you." The words escaped before I could stop them. I know I should not. No, this is supposed to be fake, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me. And I needed you to know that. Even if it changes nothing. Alessandro's hand came up to cover mine where it still rested on his face. "It changes everything." His voice was raw with emotion. "Because I love you too, Emma. I have been fighting it for months, telling myself it was just proximity or gratitude or loneliness. But tonight, when you stood with me against Victor, when you knew exactly what he was trying to do and protected me anyway, I could not deny it anymore." "But Valentina," I started to say. will always be part of my past. Alessandro interrupted. A part I loved and lost, and will grieve forever. But Emma, you are my present. You are, he struggled with the words, you are the reason I can wake up in the morning without immediately feeling that crushing weight of loss. You have made this year bearable, made living feel possible again. That is not fake. That is real. The realest thing I have felt in 5 years. He kissed me then. Not a performance. Not something for witnesses or photographs. A real kiss, desperate and tender and full of all the feelings we had been suppressing for months. When we finally broke apart, we were both crying. I am still a mess. Alessandro warned, still grieving. Still dangerous. Still living in a world that might hurt you just because you are close to me. I know. I pressed my forehead to his, and I am still broken in my own ways, still learning to trust, still figuring out who I am outside of survival mode. We are both disasters, Alessandro. Then maybe we can be disasters together. His arms came around me, holding me close. No more fake marriage. No more performance. Just us. Real and messy and complicated. Can you handle that? I think so. I pulled back to look at him. But we need to do this right. No more hiding feelings. No more pretending. If we are going to be together for real, we do it honestly. All of it. Agreed. He kissed me again. Softer this time. Starting now. We spent that night talking, really talking, for the first time without barriers. Alessandro told me more about Valentina, not hiding his continuing grief, but also acknowledging that loving me did not diminish what he had felt for her. Different loves for different times in his life. Both real. Both valid. I told him about my fears. About growing up in foster care and learning that people always leave. About how loving him terrified me, because his world was so dangerous and unpredictable. About the voice in my head that kept insisting this could not last, that I would lose him the way he lost Valentina. Then we will be brave together. Alessandro said, fight those fears together. And if I lose you, if something happens, at least I will have had this, had you, had something real instead of just a performance. The remaining 6 months of our contracted marriage became something entirely different. We were still careful in public, still played the roles we had established. But in private, we built a real relationship. Messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but genuine. Alessandro introduced me to more of his life, the parts he had been shielding me from. I sat in on business meetings, learned how his empire actually functioned, met the people who kept it running. Some of it was illegal and morally questionable, but I also saw how he provided for families, protected neighborhoods, maintained a strange form of order in spaces the law had abandoned. He met Michael finally. My brother had gotten clean, found steady work, was rebuilding his life with the second chance Alessandro had provided. The two men were wary of each other at first, but eventually developed a mutual respect. Michael because Alessandro had saved his life. Alessandro because Michael was important to me. We visited Valentina's grave together one spring morning. Alessandro had not been since her death, too afraid the grief would destroy him. But with my hand in his, he finally faced it. We stood in front of her headstone, and Alessandro introduced us. Valentina, this is Emma. The woman who saved me when I thought I was beyond saving. I think you would have liked her. She is strong like you were. Kind like you were. And she makes me want to be better, the way you always did. It should have been strange, standing in a cemetery while my husband talked to his dead wife about me. But instead, it felt right, like closing one chapter and beginning another. On what would have been our first anniversary, technically the end of our arranged marriage, Alessandro and I went to dinner at the restaurant where we had our first public appearance as a couple. But this time, there were no cameras, no performance, No audience. Just us. 1 year ago, I made you an offer. Alessandro said over dessert. $3 million to be my wife in public for 1 year. You accepted to save your brother. I accepted to hide my grief. Best business decision I ever made. I smiled. Terrible personal decision. Wonderful accident. I have a new offer. He pulled out a small box, and my breath caught. This one is not about money or contracts or protection. This one is just, will you stay married to me? For real this time. No end date. No hidden motives except that I love you and cannot imagine my life without you in it. Inside the box was a ring. Not the simple platinum band I wore. A real engagement ring. Emerald-cut diamond. Elegant and beautiful. You are supposed to propose before the wedding, I pointed out, laughing through tears. We did everything backwards. Why start following tradition now? He took my hand. Emma Walsh, who became Emma Moretti through a contract and stayed because of love. Will you continue to be my wife? My real wife? Yes. The answer was immediate, certain. Yes to all of it. To you, to this life, to whatever comes next. Yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger next to my wedding band, and we sat there grinning at each other like idiots. A year ago, I had signed a contract to be his wife in public. Now I was choosing to be his wife in every way that mattered. The hidden motive that had left me trembling that first night turned out to be more complicated than I expected. It was not just about grief or protection or performance. It was about a man so broken by loss that he could not function without building walls. About someone who needed to pretend to heal before he could actually heal. About two people who found each other while playing roles and discovered something real in the midst of the performance. Alessandro's hidden motive was not to deceive me, it was to survive. And somehow, in helping him survive, I had found my own way to live instead of just existing. My name is Emma Moretti. A year ago, a Mafia boss asked me to be his wife in public. The hidden motive behind his request left me trembling with fear and confusion. Now I understand it was not about using me. It was about learning to live again, about finding love in the wreckage of loss, about two broken people building something whole together. The contract is void now, torn up, replaced with something that cannot be written down or signed, replaced with choice, with love freely given instead of payment negotiated, with a real marriage instead of a fake one. Is my life safe? No. Alessandro's world will always carry danger, but I am no longer just a shield against his grief. I am his partner, his equal, someone who chose him knowing exactly who and what he is. The hidden motive was not what I thought. It was better. It was about becoming real. Both of us. Him learning to live with his grief instead of being destroyed by it. Me learning to trust and love despite every instinct screaming that people always leave. We are still a mess. Still figuring things out. Still navigating a complicated world with dangerous people and impossible choices. But we are doing it together. Honestly. With love that was forged in deception, but became truth anyway. Thank you for joining Emma and Alessandro on this journey. If their story touched you, please share it with others. Stories about unexpected love, about healing through grief, about relationships that start as performance and become reality. These stories matter. They remind us that people are complicated, that love is not always simple or pure, that sometimes the wrong beginning leads to the right ending. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing in messy, complicated, real love that refuses to follow the rules.